Imagine a Friday afternoon. A vendor gets a call about a building-wide access issue. Technicians arrive, cameras show activity, alarms recorded a sequence. But when teams try to stitch the timeline together, every system has a slightly different clock. What should have been a 2-hour fix turns into a multi-day investigation. Tenants stay offline, and people start pointing fingers. I want to open there because timestamps are boring until they slow everything down. Welcome to Built, Wired and Secured. I'm Alex Morgan. Today, we're talking about time. Yes, clocks. And why consistent, auditable time across building systems keeps incident response fast and recoveries clean. This episode is about governance, evidence standards, and simple acceptance tests, not protocol how-tos or configuration minutia. We've put a one-page time sync checklist on the Built, Wired, and Secured Resource Hub if you want the quick checklist mentioned in the show.
Joining me is Michael Harrington, a senior property manager who lives in the world of tenant disruption, vendor coordination, and building resiliency. Michael, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here. From an operational standpoint, inconsistent time is one of those invisible things that suddenly becomes the loudest problem in the room when things fail. Tenants feel this immediately. Log a ticket, and suddenly you're trying to prove what happened when your evidence all speaks slightly different languages.
Let's unpack that. In practical terms, what does time matters look like for a property manager dealing with access control, cameras, alarms, HVAC schedules, and monitoring?
Start with access logs and camera video. If the door controller says 1402, the camera says 1407, and the alarm panel logs 1405, you can't reliably correlate who's where or what triggered what. That makes it hard to sequence events for a vendor or to prove tenant claims. Another example, HVAC schedules tied to time of day control. If clocks drift, scheduled preconditioning or setback routines run at odd times, tenants complain, and you open what looks like a performance issue when it's just timing. And for forensic timelines, if you're trying to determine root cause during an outage, mismatched timestamps can obscure whether a sensor went offline before or after an alarm, which is critical for remediation.
You mentioned vendor coordination. In mixed vendor systems, who typically owns the time policy? Is that an IT responsibility, facilities, or the owners?
Short answer, it needs a clear owner, and the owner should be named in O&M and handover docs. From an operational standpoint, I prefer IT to own authoritative time sources because they usually manage network infrastructure, but facilities or property operations should own the policy for which systems must follow that time and how often checks happen. The key is governance. List which systems must sync, who enforces it, and what you do when drift is detected. Capture that in vendor scopes and into the O&M so it survives staff turnover.
Okay, inventory and ownership. What should teams include in a simple inventory so they're not guessing which systems matter?
Start with a short list. Access control, video recording systems, alarm panels, building automation controllers tied to schedules, entry/egress point sensors, and centralized monitoring or logging platforms. For each system, note, does it report timestamps? Does it participate in incident investigations? And can it be remotely updated? That gives you a prioritized set for your time policy. Capture this in the O&M and make sure vendors acknowledge time requirements during commissioning. And remember my question every time you write a requirement. What breaks if this goes down? If the answer affects tenant operations or evidence, it belongs on the list.
Great line. Let's move to acceptance tests and maintenance, something teams can actually run this week. Walk me through a few lightweight checks.
3 simple checks I use. First, a 15-minute cross-system timestamp comparison. At a scheduled time, trigger a known event. Swipe a test card, generate a test alarm, and note the times in camera footage, the access log, and the alarm log. Compare timestamps within a small tolerance you set in policy. Second, boot time validation. After planned maintenance or a power cycle, confirmed systems show correct time on startup. Many devices drift or revert to defaults on reboot. Third, periodic log correlation spot checks. Pull a handful of recent incidents and make sure sequences align. If you automate any of this, even a basic script or scheduler that captures timestamps to a central location will catch drift early. And set a maintenance cadence, monthly quick checks, quarterly audits.
When you see drift, what's your operational playbook? Immediate mitigation, long-term fix, or both?
Both. Immediately, document the drift, note affected windows, and preserve logs. Don't overwrite them. And communicate with vendors and tenants about the window of uncertainty. Longer term, update O&M to include the root cause and corrective action. Was it a misconfigured device, a missing sync service after a reboot, or a gap in vendor responsibilities? Then adjust your acceptance tests or cadence so it doesn't repeat. Also, include a monitoring heuristic and alert if multiple systems diverge beyond your tolerance so you don't discover problems during an incident.
Can you share a quick anonymized case where alignment sped recovery and a near miss where drift caused trouble?
Sure. Quick win. At one campus, we enforced a simple acceptance test during commissioning. Months later, a parking gate incident happened. Logs across the gate controller, camera, and access portal lined up within a minute. The vendor arrived with a clear timeline, and we resolved it the same day. Contrast that with a near miss. At another property, a building-wide power test left several controllers with default times. During a minor outage, the misaligned timestamps made it impossible to prove whether a sensor failed before an alarm or after, which delayed remediation and left tenants frustrated. That one prompted us to add boot time validation to our checklist immediately.
Those are helpful. Before we close, give listeners 3 things they can do this week to reduce time-related risk.
1. Build a short inventory of systems that produce timestamps and prioritize those tied to tenant operations or incident evidence. 2. Run a 15-minute cross-system timestamp comparison. Test a swipe, a camera clip, and an alarm entry, and document the results. 3. Assign ownership in your O&M or handover documents. Name who owns time policy, cadence for checks, and how drift is handled.
Perfect. If you want a ready-made guide, head to the Built, Wired, and Secured Resource Hub and download our one-page time sync checklist. It's non-technical and designed for property teams and IT leaders to run quickly. Thanks, Michael, for grounding this in what actually breaks and what we can do about it.
Thanks, Alex. Remember, check who owns time, test the timeline, and preserve evidence when something goes wrong. That keeps things moving and tenants happier.
That's our show. Built to last. Wired with intention. Secured for the real world. I'm Alex Morgan. Join us next time for another practical episode on the real-world technology behind modern buildings.